In this video we're going to look at a few things you can do with audio with book pages. As an example, I'm going to use a simple book that's got 3 book pages in it because I want to be able to navigate between book pages and show you some stuff there. Each of these doesn't have much on it, it just has a graphic, and then I've got a couple of bubbles showing information, and I've got a simple timer set up that triggers the display of those bubbles. And that's pretty much it. So that's the example we're going to use. Now, I'm going to start with adding something which is asked for relatively often, but it's usually the last thing that you get asked for, and that is book sound, i.e. sound that will play throughout the whole duration of that book being displayed, regardless of which page you're on. So you'll typically use that for some background music or something going on in the background there. So let's look at how to do that. I'm going to select the first book page in my book, and I'm going to add the audio to that. You can add book audio to any of your book pages, but it will only start playing once you display that specific page. So clearly it makes sense to have it as on the first page. So I'll select the first book page. I'm going to go to Insert Media Object, Audio. Okay, and I'm going to give that a name of background music. Always give everything a meaningful name, it will help you later. Now the source field, here is where I need to select the audio file, and I've got a bunch of files set up already just to speed things up. I'm going to go and select that. I can select any audio file in my work area or that's already attached to another object, or I can insert a brand new file. If I'm going to insert a new file, what I'm going to do is I can either put it somewhere in my work area where it can be reused, or I can attach it to this particular object. And if I want to attach it to this object, I need to make sure that's selected. Either select it here or select current object at the top. Go to Insert File, navigate to that file and select it. This is my background music. I stole this from a website called soundimage.org, who give you a bunch of free ones that you can use, probably not for commercial purposes, but for our example it works well. And it is a looping one, which makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to attach that. That's now been included in here. Make sure it's selected, click OK. I've now got this as my source. Now the next important thing, super important, is I need to select what sound channel I want to play this through. You can think of sound channels as like the layers on the book page. There are, I think, 5 sound channels that you can use, and you can play different audio in different channels, and that's kind of crucial here. If you play audio in one channel and then play another piece of audio in the same channel, the first piece is going to stop so it can play the second piece. Okay, it kind of interrupts whatever's going on already on that channel. But because you've got 5 channels, you can effectively provide 5 sets of audio at the same time. Why would you want to do that? Well, we'll look at that as we get through this video. For this, I'm going to say I want this to be in the book sound channel, because I want this to basically play throughout the whole book. Book sound is a channel that's got specific use. So volume, I'm going to set that to something nice and quiet, maybe 10% volume. These are percentages. I'm going to set it to start automatically. I'm going to set it on repeat. Okay, now what's going to happen, I don't need to trigger this. Because I've got start automatically here, I don't need to have an action trigger it. So let's quickly play this, and you should hear what happens. I'm not going to preview it here because I want to show it across multiple book pages, because that's kind of the point of this. So I'm going to play it. And you can hear that started straight away as soon as I display this first page. All my animation happens, the music's still going on in the background. And as I flip to the next page, that sound keeps going, and the page after that, back to the second page, back to the first page. All of the navigation between pages in this book, that sound is consistent and continued. It doesn't stop and restart each time it gets to a page, it just plays the whole thing through. So that is the purpose of book sound. Okay, now let's look at the most common use of audio in book pages, which is for a narrative or an explanation over the top of it, basically a voiceover. So there's a few different ways you can do this. I'll look at well, not necessarily the easiest way, but I'll look at a simple way of doing that first. So under page sound, I select this to activate it, and there's a bunch of options I have in here. I can load in a file, which we'll look at doing in a minute, but I can also use the text to voice functionality of this. This is not quite as good as it is for simulations yet, because you can't use Google Cloud text to voice, which is a lot more natural sounding, but you can use whatever is available on your Windows PC, which is typically what's used for screen readers and stuff like that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go into here, click on edit text to speech. It gives you a huge dialog box here where you can type in whatever audio you want to be played. Okay, if you want to see how that sounds, you can just click the play button, but we'll hear it in a minute anyway. So click OK. If you need to see that again, you can expand the page sound information here, so you can see that text in here. You cannot change it here for some odd reason. You have to go into here, probably because as soon as you save it, it does actually generate that text. So that is my page sound. Now, page sound always plays in the page sound channel. So you don't need to select that. In fact, you can't select it anywhere. It will always play in that channel. So let's listen to how that plays now. I'm going to just preview here because I don't need to go between pages.
This is the address tab. You use this to maintain your communication preferences.
And there we have it. So that is a nice, easy way of adding text. It's not the most, again, it's not the most natural sounding text, but it's usually adequate. It's usually fit for government. So, and it's a lot easier to use that built-in thing than it is to get in some voice talent or do it yourself, because it's always going to be the same. You can edit that text now and then play it back, and it will automatically use that new text. You don't have to re-record anything in a soundproof room or etc, etc. So it's a very easy way if your client insists on having audio. Okay, nice and clear. Okay, so now let's assume that we've decided that the automated text to voice isn't really good enough. We want to provide our own lovely voice on top of that. So here we're going to add book page sound, i.e. a narrative of us providing explanations on the screen. And I'll actually explain what's in these bubbles instead of just giving a generic narrative that doesn't actually tie in with those. So I could go into page sound here and hit record and record my audio there. That works perfectly well. But let's say I've already created that audio file because I went to our little soundproof media room and I recorded it there, so it's all nice and clean. So I already have an audio file on that. So I'm going to do this on my second page. Now, notice that we do have an audio file on here for background music that is set to run on the book sound channel. If I go to my next book page, I don't have that in here, and I don't need it in here because this is a book page within the same book that has a preceding book page that has that book audio on it. So I'm going to do the same thing though. I'm going to insert a new audio file. I'm going to call this one my narrative. And the source of this, I'm going to again insert into my current object, and I am going to select my file there, insert that. Now I have this audio object. I need to make sure that this is going to play in the page sound channel. Okay, and I've got it to set to start automatically. I don't need to have this repeating though, obviously. Volume, set it to whatever you need to be. By default it's 100%. I'll show you where to find those defaults in a minute. So this has now given me a audio file which will play automatically for this page. And if I go and preview that again,
select the format in which you want decimal numbers, including monetary amounts, to be displayed from the decimal notation field drop-down. Select the format in which you want dates to be displayed from the date format drop-down. Select your time zone in the time zone.
Okay, I'll stop that there. Now, as you can see, all of that fitted in nicely. I was basically reading what was on the screen already. So the important thing to note there though is you'll notice that the bubbles were brought in at the relevant point when the audio started to explain that bubble, which means I need to be very careful about my timing here. These times that I put into here on when these bubbles are introduced, I had to make sure matched perfectly where the audio was. So I had to record the audio and then play it and mark the times at which I needed to bring those bubbles in. So that all makes sense there. So now let's look at another way of providing audio where it ties in nicely with other information on the screen. So I'm going to go to my last page here. Now I've got two bubbles in here and they've both got a lot of information on them. So what I'm going to do is I've got two audio files, one for each bubble, and we'll bring those in and then we'll trigger them when we display that bubble. Okay, so I'm going to go to Insert Audio. Same thing, I'm going to call this one the Parameter ID bubble. Parameter ID audio, I'm going to go and select that. So that's going to give us the audio for our first bubble, and then I'm going to bring in the one for the second bubble as well. Same thing, I'm going to call this one. Okay, so now I have my two audio files in here. Parameter ID audio for this first bubble, and my other one is called Obtain Parameter Audio for my second bubble. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to attach these audio files to these bubbles so that they're played as soon as that bubble is displayed. So to do that, I'm going to go to the Objects tab. Here's my first bubble. I'm going to select that, and down under Actions I'm going to have On Visible, i.e. when this thing is shown, and I've got them fading in. I could use On Show instead, but On Visible at the end of the fade in, I'm going to start that audio. And that first audio is Parameter ID audio. Select that and I'm going to set it to play. Now what I'm also going to do is I'm going to say once it's been, or if we hide that bubble, i.e. when the next one's displayed or something, I'm going to stop this audio just to make sure that there's nothing overlapping. Okay, so I am going to go to here, Parameter ID audio, and I'm going to stop. Now for my other bubble, I'm going to basically do the same thing. On Visible, I'm going to Obtain Parameter Audio, play, and then on Hidden, Obtain Parameter Audio, stop. Now, the channel for these, they're currently defaulting to the effects channel. I don't want them on there. This is explanations. This is basically your narrative. It's kind of similar to your page sound. In fact, it effectively is the same as page sound for reasons we'll see in a minute. But I put it in as explanations, and I'm going to put this one in on explanations as well. So what's going to happen is when those bubbles are displayed, and that is triggered by this time control here at ½ second and then 10 seconds, this audio will be played. So let's preview that and see how it sounds.
If there are fields that you use a lot, you can set default values for them by specifying the parameter ID for the field and the default value in the table provided. If you don't know the parameter ID for a field, go to any transaction that contains.
So there you go. So this is a nice, neater way of doing it. It's a little bit more effort in that you've got to separate your sound files and then get them triggered, but it means that instead of having to tie up your timing of your animation with your timing of your narrative, you basically just set up the timing of the animation the way you want it, and then the narrative's all fixed for you. So that's a good way of doing that. So there's only one last thing I want to show you, and that is to re-emphasize the use of these different channels. So far we have seen that you can have stuff in the book sound, which plays throughout all of the pages on that book. We've seen page sound, we've seen explanations. There's two more channels, effects and others. So what I'm going to do, just to show how this works and how the layering of the channels work, is I'm going to insert a last audio file that basically just gives us a ding or a bong or something. I can't remember what it is. So let's say this is going to be a ding. And the source for this, oh, it's a beep. There you go. So I'm going to select this beep 08 file, which again I cribbed from somewhere free on the internet. Doesn't really matter what it is. I'm going to leave it on the effects channel. And what I'm going to do is every time just to demonstrate this, every time I click this logo, I want to hear that beep. So on click, I'm going to add in here that I want to hear my ding. I need to make sure that I don't start this one automatically, because obviously I don't want it starting automatically. Same with these ones actually, I should have done that earlier. I don't want any of these to start automatically, I want them to be triggered. So let's see what that looks like when we play it. I'm going to save it to make sure it pulls in all the latest changes, and I'm going to start from the first page to make sure we get all of our book sound playing as well. So hit play on that.
This is the address
Here's
tab.
you can hear the background
You use
audio
this to
going
maintain
there.
your
I'll ignore this
communication
narrative.
preferences.
Let me get to the right page here.
If there are fields that you use a lot,
So here you can hear that you've got the narrative, you've got the background music, and
the default value in the table provided. If you don't know the parameter,
every time I click this, it doesn't interrupt the narrative, it doesn't interrupt the background music, but you can hear that ding.
Icon and you'll see.
Okay, so that is basically 3 levels of audio right there that are playing. The background music, the narrative in here, and the little ding whenever I click on this. So, all clear so far. Now, the last thing that I want to point out with all of this, and again relating to that layering, is that in the book page there is a audio control, and that has a bunch of different sliders in here for different channels. The master here will mute all of the audio. Now the other channels in here, we've got book sound. That's my background music, I can hide that. I've got my narrative, also the page audio, the book page channel and the narrative are both on here. And then the last one is effects, which was that ding that I added, or other. They're all controlled by that. Now, I said earlier that these have a default volume that come in. Where that's defined is under tools and settings. Okay, if you go to tools, settings, and then look under playback settings, book reader audio, you'll see in here you've got general, narrative, book sound, and effects. And there's a separate checkbox to disable effects if you don't want them being played at all. That's just the effects channel. Okay, so it's all a bit confusing because the names are slightly different. So to help you out there, here's a handy quick reference of the tools settings for the defaults, and the book page channels, and the book reader volume control. And I've color coded them so you can see what ties up with what. So on the volume control, starting with that, master basically covers everything, and the default for that is set by the general property. Okay, the book sound volume control obviously controls the book sound, and that's also the book sound default here, so that's at least consistently named. Now where it gets slightly more complicated, the narrative volume control and narrative default volume setting controls the page sound and the explanations. So page sound and explanations channels are referred to as narrative. And then finally you have effects, which is covered by the effects default, and again covers 2 channels, effects and others. So that's how all of these tie up together. Okay, and that is all I wanted to cover on audio for book pages and books. So you can see you've got multiple channels that you can provide different types of information in. You can have them triggered by certain events. You can have multiple audio playing at multiple times. You can import audio, you can record your own audio, or you can use the text-to-speech audio. Hope you find that useful. Thanks for watching, and we'll have more to follow.